Carmen. Ready to eat.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. The chair calls into order at 6:08 p.m. Eastern the meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'll take a roll call.
Naomi Lemur,
Present.
Ebony Crispin. Ebony Crispin, Sandra Dennis, Marie France Jean Farens,
Present.
Andrea McDonald here, Evan Shields,
Present.
Honorable Councilwoman Cassandra Timothy,
Here.
Michael McDermott,
Here.
Lola Capers, Nakisha Williams. That's it.
Wonderful. Recognizing that we have quorum, we'll continue with our meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve our minutes from our October 20th, 2022 informal meeting of the committee via Zoom.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. We'll move forward to our presentation of our AHAC reports. If the committee will allow me to just speak informally here, in this moment in 2022, we are in a unprecedented economic crisis as we come out of COVID. Our state and our city are in an affordability crisis in which housing, amongst so many other things, is unfortunately, one, not affordable, and two, we have some of the oldest housing stock in our city compared to other cities across the county, and there's so much that we can do as a committee. This committee actually, just to give a little bit of background for both our 2021 to 2022 report and our 22 to 23 reports, this committee has actually laid dormant since 2008. For public record, all of this is in our agenda. But recently this year, we received an allotment of state funds over the $350,000 threshold, which is an amazing opportunity for our city for the development of new affordable housing and the renovation of our existing affordable housing stock. And with that said, in 2022, that SHIP funding allocation has increased above this threshold to $367,278, which requires us under state law to reconfigure our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, or AHAC, and we've got two mandates. One, to propose policies for the fiscal year of 2021 to 2022 in accordance with state law, and also to recommend policies for the upcoming fiscal year of 22 to 23. That said, since this committee was reconstituted this summer, we've met several times informally over Zoom just to get an understanding from staff, from our council, from various stakeholders internal to our city about what's at stake, what type of progressive policy can we move forward, but better yet, what pragmatic policy can we put in place potentially that can actually be done and match the need by various stakeholders. That said, this committee, just as a very brief closeout of my remarks, moved to actually not move any specific policies for the fiscal year of 2021 and 2022, but also further to move forward some very, very progressive policies for the upcoming fiscal year in 22 and 23. So that said, moving forward through the rest of our reports today, what I'd like to do is actually entertain two different motions. One is an entertainment of our motion to approve our fiscal year 2021 and 2022 incentive review, which was not to recommend any specific new policies for that year. And after that motion, hopefully has been carried, the chair will entertain another motion to begin discussion of our new policies we would like to move forward for the next fiscal year of 22 to 23. So just as a recap of the two motions the chair would entertain, one motion would be to approve no recommendation for fiscal year of 2021 to 22, the prior year. And after that motion may have carried, to then entertain a motion to open up a discussion of next year's policies.
Mr. Chairman, do we have to, is the staff have presentation, or do we have to open it up to the public or read any public comments that was submitted into the records before?
I'd like to make
I think your mic.
I'd like to make two, not correction, adjustment in the language as requested by the state. The state doesn't go by fiscal year. They go by calendar. That's why I had to send you the updated report. So instead of talking about fiscal year 2021, 2022, we have the 2021 AHAC report and the 2022 AHAC report. So they make the correction for me because I had to submit them the draft to see where we were headed. That's number one in the motion, so we're gonna have to fix that. And number two, the second observation that they say, it's not really that you're gonna have no recommendation, it's really to keep the status quo for 2021, the way it was, so no further recommendation for 2021. So
Okay.
those are the two corrections that I wanted to put on.
And to the councilwoman's point, was there any public announcements or, let me be more specific, was there any public comment that was presented before this meeting to staff or to any other folks of the city regarding
We
either
did
year?
not receive any. It's not a mandatory to have a commenting period, but it is mandatory to advertise. So it was advertised properly, 15 days advertised, but we haven't received any comments.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't know if the remaining of the board has any comments, but I echo your same sentiments, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all of the committee members who met over Zoom these past, 4 sessions. And Debbie and staff for, really giving us the nuts and bolts of this. As you stated previously, in 2021, the reason why this board was not active is that we didn't meet that dollar threshold that would have activated this board. So because we now received that funding and allotment over the $350,000 additional for this year, the 2022 report is actually required for the funding that the council is going to be approving in December. This was the additional, I want to say, $1 million that we received for homelessness through the additional, which, is that correct? Is it the 1 million or 700,000?
No, it's different. The money that you are referring to is from the home ARP, which is different. This one is for the one that the chairman noted. We went above the 350,000. We are scheduled to receive 367,278, and I do believe there is an increase. I think we are at 400,000 now.
Oh, wow, okay.
We receive an increase, it's just that we cannot have it yet, so we need to.
We cannot receive it
Yeah.
until we've actually,
Approve those
Approved, okay.
recommendations and send the report to the state.
And do we have to go over the recommendations tonight in detail?
No, we already discussed it.
Okay.
Now, what we're gonna do tonight, it's one by one, we're gonna have to vote on each recommendation.
and that's
Okay.
for the, this upcoming calendar year,
2022.
correct?
2022, because for this one, it's like, it's a sum up, no further recommendation, we keep it as is. And then 2022, you guys discuss it, we have to summarize it and agree on the terms and vote on them.
Okay, so I'll motion to approve the 2021 recommendation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2021 recommendations, which for clarity of the record is to contain the current status quo as stated. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion carries. To the point of staff for the upcoming 2022 calendar year, thank you for the correction, not fiscal, incentive review, I will entertain a motion for the following report and approval process, that we review each of the 13 policies one by one, and carry forward a recommendation or no recommendation on each of those policies, so that staff may move forward this report to the state.
Are you asking for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
I am.
Okay, so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Oh, excuse me, pardon. Our secretary has reminded us that
Second?
I believe it was seconded by.
Second.
Marie Fran- Okay, thank you.
Okay, Matt.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. I could have sworn I had heard a second
heard
from
it?
somebody. Maybe I was hearing things, I don't know. Okay, just for the public record here, so that the community that's following along can kind of understand what we're doing as we're reviewing each of these recommendations. The state has mandated, and by the state I mean the Florida Housing Finance Corporation that actually guides our policy decisions here. The state has mandated that we review several different policies in regard to affordable housing, specifically as an AHAC. I'll just quickly say what those policies are, and then we'll go one by one to review. One is expedited permitting. The second policy is impact fee waiver or modifications. The third is density flexibility. The next is reservation of infrastructure capacity. Next is accessory dwelling units. Next is reduction of parking and setback requirements. Next is flexible lot configurations. Next is modification of street requirements for affordable housing. Next is oversight of policies, procedures, regulations, or plan provisions that impact housing costs. Next is land bank inventory. And the final policy to be considered, mandated by the state, is the encouragement of development around transit-oriented hubs. That said, as mentioned in our opening remarks, this committee has met informally on each of these policies. We've presented very specific recommendations for each of them for the upcoming year in a report that was a draft report that was presented publicly prior to this meeting. And we've already entertained a motion to move forward with discussion of each and approval of each. So that said, let's move forward to the very first recommendation, which is expedited permitting.
Will staff go,
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
will staff go over each recommendation and then we vote on it, or do you want us up here to just kind of go through each recommendation?
We already discussed it. It's up to you now to
Okay.
proceed.
Okay. I think for the sake of clarity, it might make sense if staff presents a very brief synopsis for each, not necessarily rehashing what's already here in the report that was presented to the public beforehand, but at least a brief synopsis of each item. And then we can, as a AHAC, review our prior recommendations and then vote on each. How does it sound?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. Staff, let's start with expedited permitting. Can we get a brief synopsis of the issues at stake here from the draft report?
That would be Miss Love show.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee. The first item is expedited permitting. One of the things we talked about is how oftentimes many of these development projects that come through, it requires multiple stages of approval processes and how best to expedite that process. And that's what this particular item is on, is how do we expedite the permitting of these type of projects. Try to keep it very.
That was very brief. Much appreciated by the chair. Okay.
I don't know if you want to go by the recommendation that
Absolutely.
That was the consensus.
Absolutely. So I'll give a brief synopsis here. This one was probably one of our more controversial policies. We spent about 4 months discussing this one in specific. Here is what our committee recommended. Comprehensive permitting processes is probably one of the best policies to expedite the approval process for brand new developments. What we suggested was that North Miami developments that receive Community Redevelopment Agency funds, that's CRA for short, that with those developments that have at least a 15% set aside of their units for affordable housing, and by affordable housing, we mean for very low income and low income tenants making 60% area median income or lower, that those developments receive a comprehensive permitting process. And when we say comprehensive permitting, we mean an expedited permitting process where they get, quote, to make it informal, essentially to the front of the line in our policies and procedures so that we can move forward with those affordable housing developments as quickly as possible. That was the recommendation that this committee informally suggested. Is there any discussion here on this item?
Can open it to the public and you can discuss it among the members.
Sure. Well, in fact, we should probably do that for each of these. We'll open up to the public for comment on this specific policy item. Okay. Seeing no comment on this item, we can move forward to board discussion or an entertainment of a motion.
I think it's maybe just good to put on record, this one, we said at least 15% of the units that were set aside for affordable housing would receive this expedited permitting process. A lot of the projects that we do see that come before the planning commission in the city, they do try to include anywhere between 10 to 15%. For those, we're trying to incentivize them to at least include 15%. So with that, I'll motion that we approve the recommendation for Section A, expedited permitting.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion carries. We have a recommendation for expedited permitting. Fantastic. Let's move to our next policy, which is impact fee waivers or modifications. Can we get a brief staff synopsis?
Yes, sir. Again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. Fee waivers are multiple factions here. It could be you're waiving the cost of the permit. Of course, we can't waive building permit fees, but other approval fees. And there is also a waiver of impact fees. Right now, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Also, from our Housing and Social Services Department, can you give us a brief understanding of what's in the current LHAP or Local Housing Assistance Plan for this specific policy?
No, this one, it was not mentioned at all in our LHAP that was submitted back in 2020 for the next 3 years. And this is, I believe, one of your recommendations. If it's approved, once you send your recommendation to council, if it's approved, to go back and amend our LHAP to reflect this impact waiver of incentive strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you for stating that for the public record. Further, our committee recommendation for this policy was to continue the application of this strategy on a case-by-case basis and further amend our LHAP as our Housing and Social Services Director just stated. I'll entertain, is there any public comment on this particular policy?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so we're maintaining the 15%, correct?
Going back.
No,
That was
that
A.
was in regards
That
to
was
expedited
expedited
permitting.
Yeah, I know, but for projects that are doing the projects that are applying for the impact fee waiver,
Mhm.
are these going to be projects that also meet the criteria of 15%?
No, this was, I believe it was 51% or more set aside for affordable housing units,
Okay,
which is a pretty high watermark.
okay. No, more the better.
I have a,
To be even more specific, though, it was 51% set aside of units that technically were workforce, because I believe my understanding is that it's 80% area median income, which would be middle income
Mhm.
folks, teachers, firefighters, nurses, police officers, et cetera, rather than very low income. But that was our understanding from staff on this policy. Go ahead.
so just a follow-up question. I just want to confirm whose responsibility, as we're bringing forth these policies, whose responsibility will it be to enforce them once this is in place?
That's a great question.
Staff?
I can answer that question for you. The bulk of these things that you come across, that you're proposing would come through my shop, the planning department. And then as it moves on down to like impact fee waivers would be the building department. So it starts at planning, and then certain items would then be the responsibility of the building department, such as the impact fee waivers. But that request has to go to the city manager, and the city manager has to approve the request currently on a case-by-case basis, unrelated to whether the project has affordable housing or not.
And for the record, and to Ms. Bloomer's comment, can staff confirm also that these policies have to, after this committee has approved them, have to then be approved by our council before implementation,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
concerning to approve, adopt your recommendation, then we can start amending, ask the manager to, the comprehensive permit processing that we guys are asking, those are steps after council approved your recommendation.
Okay.
So this is, just for clarification purpose, we are recommending to council what we
Correct.
believe is the best policy.
Yeah.
And when will be the meeting where they decide to agree on this or disagree?
Actually,
Technically,
I
December
am
thir-
tentative on the December 13, but it's a loaded agenda.
Mhm.
I might not make it. I'm gonna be, they will roll me over for the first meeting in January.
And I believe the chair stated that we are on a deadline. What is that deadline
The
for the state?
The deadline is not for the council approval. It's for this report that you are voting on right now.
Mhm.
Meaning the 2021.
Both 2021, 2022.
So just for clarification purposes, and these are great questions, there's really two major decision points here. One is on if this committee does not make specific recommendations that are approved by this committee for each of the items, then we may not be able to use those state funds allocated for affordable housing unless we make those recommendations and our report is submitted to the state. So that's decision one of two. Decision two here that's incredibly important is that after we've made these recommendations, they then go to the council for implementation.
Thank you.
Okay. Any board discussion on this policy or motion to entertain?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the recommendation has been approved. All right, let's move forward to our next policy, which is density flexibility. Can we get a brief staff synopsis?
In this particular policy, in this particular item, we currently allow flexibility in densities through a conditional use permit. It's not specific to affordable housing in any fashion. If they are in an overlay and you can meet the project, you can get bonus units. But they're, as I said, they're not specific to affordable housing.
Quick question for staff. Can you speak to the long-term planning sessions that are currently underway involving our comprehensive plan and the like?
Yes, sir. On December 6th, the Planning Commission we have, every 7 years, the city has to review its comprehensive plan. to determine if there are changes necessary based on Florida statutes, if there are local changes and conditions, and then just any cleanup document, any cleanup of, edits and things like that, minor edits. We have been working with a consultant and have done a lot of interviews, have a website that's dedicated to this. It's going to Planning Commission on December 6th, and then it will go to City Council on December 13th for first reading. So we expect the document to be back and adopted somewhere around March of 2023. And we have added a few of these items in here to the comprehensive plan. Including on this density flexibility issue of if you are producing, if you have 10%, I think it starts off with 15% of affordable workforce housing, then you can get a bonus, a density bonus, so it gives them a little extra oomph over and above. The other is that out of the total bonus pool that we have, whatever that number ultimately is, we're looking at about 8,700. That 15% of those units will be set aside for affordable and workforce housing. That is the proposal for council consideration that staff has put into that document.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I applaud staff for certainly taking our informal discussions that this committee's had into account into our comprehensive plan that's currently underway, so thank you for that. I appreciate that context because our recommendation here was to defer discussion on this particular item until our meeting next year, given that the city is currently underway in comprehensive planning. Further, there's actually a few other policies that we made that exact same deferral recommendation for. Is there any public comment for this particular item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to board discussion or entertainment of a motion for approval.
Wants to move it? So moved.
Second.
Wonderful. The recommendation of deferral of discussion of this item to next year until after the city long-term planning sessions have completed has been moved and seconded. Do I have all opposed? Or excuse me, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Wonderful. Let's move forward to our next recommendation on reservation of infrastructure capacity. Can we get a brief synopsis from staff on this policy?
Yes, sir. In this particular policy, it's a set-aside of potable water, sanitary sewer capacity, set-aside specific to affordable housing. We currently do not have that, and we have just completed our infrastructure study as part of the comp plan update. We need to, that infrastructure study looked at what is the current capacity and what would we need to do to allow population growth in the city between now and 2045. And so I think that's the end of my, brief synopsis, sir.
Okay, thank you. Further, for this particular policy, we actually recommended tabling discussion on this until after the city completes its infrastructure and long-term planning review that's currently underway.
So move.
Oh, hold on. We had agreed for public comment, then discussion. Any public comment on this particular item? Okay. Board discussion or a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, let's move forward to the next recommendation on accessory dwelling units. Staff synopsis?
Yes, sir. Accessory dwelling units are one of the main tools that are being promoted. This allows properties of a certain size to be able to add an additional unit, small unit, to their property. It is currently allowed under the code, and doesn't need any changes at this point. We're going to be looking at that as part of our comp plan process if there's any tweaks needed to it.
Fantastic. The committee recommended actually to amend our current LHAP to reflect this strategy. It currently does not, which is an issue that needs to be corrected as soon as possible. And further, we've had accessory dwelling units in place in the city for quite some time, since I believe at least the late 80s as a policy provision. Is there any public comment on this particular policy? Okay. Seeing none, board discussion or a motion?
So move.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's move forward to our next policy, which is reduction of parking and setback requirements. Can I get a brief staff synopsis?
Yes, sir. Currently our code has very specific standards for multifamily dwelling units as to the amount of parking they have to provide. The only exemption to that is for senior housing at 55 and over, 100% deed restricted. It does not specify any relationship to affordable housing as far as providing any reduction. That particular one is not on staff's radar at this point.
Why is that?
We have issues already with the public concern about not having adequate parking on the current developments that are coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And so this could be something that is brought up by city council or planning commissioner during the comp plan update hearings, but without a study to justify what that number should be. It's really not something we can tackle
Okay.
at this point. It requires a citywide parking study, and we just don't have that period at this point to be able to do that.
Is the parking study already a part of our comprehensive plan or infrastructure planning process?
The parking study, unless we are specifically looking to reduce parking, is not part of that.
Okay.
Through the chairman, Ms. Love,
Yes, ma'am.
did we not, I think council voted to move, well, I don't know if we voted to move it, but I know the city manager received directive to conduct a citywide parking study to determine where we would put, like metered parking. Is that in motion?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay,
That wouldn't come through my department necessarily.
okay.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this particular policy? Okay, seeing none, the recommendation that committee made for this policy was to move for no recommendation, specifically because, one, this policy is not specific to affordable housing. It's something that is specific to all of us, particularly in planning, and further, that a parking study involved with hopefully an infrastructure analysis is something that the city's currently comprehending. And after that analysis has been complete, that we would make further recommendations next year. Is there any board discussion or a motion on this particular item?
So move, no recommendation.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving forward. Flexible lot configurations. Can we get a brief synopsis from staff?
Flexible lot configuration is where you allow a lot to be developed on that doesn't meet the current standards of your code. And so we do not have that in place in any fashion, whether it's affordable or current. You have to meet the lot size requirements.
Is this something that is currently being contemplated in our comprehensive plan that's underway?
No, sir.
Okay. Why is that?
It's a little bit more challenging to pick it up in this process because we have to deal with Miami-Dade County, We'd have to do a very specific analysis of how you're going to treat these lots, because if they're platted lot at a certain size, to change that lot configuration may require replatting. So we wanted to look at what the county's would require us to do in order to be able to implement something like this.
I have a question. Have we contacted the county to have these discussions, or we're just saying that this is just the process in place, but we haven't begun it yet?
Staff would not have contacted the county because you haven't made any sort of recommendations that have been approved by council for us to move forward with anything in that regard yet.
So it has to begin with council and then come
Right.
back to you?
All of
Okay.
these recommendations have to be approved by city council, and then we could start moving forward. Assuming they've approved it and they give city manager direction to implement these things, then staff would be moving forward with these types of analyses.
Thank you.
Quick follow-up on this particular policy. Would there be any type of ameliorative policy we could have in place for flexible lot configurations that would help affordable housing? I don't think that was something that we really heavily discussed with this policy in our previous discussions.
Not that I can think of right off the bat, sorry, you put me on the spot here, so I have to apologize for not being prepared for that answer. I'd have to think on that a bit, sir, my apologies.
Okay.
So I'd
And I
have to
think
come back.
too, like, just to speak for staff, since I was in your shoes too, sometimes you're dealt with so much with so little. So to pile up so many recommendations, now staff that would have to implement, like before they can even implement maybe a third of what we're recommending, they have to get used, they have to, first study it, understand the implication, understand the building code that changes every year. So there's way more, intricacies and, things that, to get the ball rolling. So there's different things that we would have to do before we can even get to a place where we can say, hey, can we configure this lot to build 100 units when it's maybe, an acre, who knows, depending on what the size is. And I think we're also waiting on the infrastructure study. Now I'm gonna have to follow up with the city manager about the parking study. So there's a lot of things in motion right now. So I think that's kind of like, what's, staff is kind of reluctant to say, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and do this right now because they have a million things on their plate. So I definitely understand.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, listen, nobody wants to create more work than what it's worth. But my understanding, when we last discussed this, I think in our October 20th meeting, was that staff was currently looking at flexible lot configurations as a part of both the comprehensive permitting, or the comprehensive plan, and the infrastructure study. And now I'm getting just an update here that that's not being contemplated, which is a little bit different from what we discussed before, which was why we suggested no recommendation here, because
We were waiting.
we were waiting for, the report. I think it's coming out in March of next year, if I'm not mistaken, the infrastructure study.
No, you said it was completed, right?
The infrastructure, it's the adoption of the comprehensive plan that we expect to be
Okay.
in March.
In March, okay, understood.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we brought
ahead.
these ideas forward to our consultant who advised us of all the stuff that we would need to do, and we went,
Don't bite off more you can chew.
So we have to wait to do all, as the councilwoman said, there's a lot of things we have to do in order to even be able to implement some of these things, and this is one of those.
Okay. Mr. McDermott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this was, I went to the FRA conference, and this was an item that came up at the FRA conference. And the reaction of most of the cities, or what came out of it, was that because of the nature of the potential change in a neighborhood with that flexibility, that most cities are saying no, because of the fact that of the public resistance, feedback, what have you, because it does have a potential to change the very nature of a neighborhood. So they just decided that this was not a recommended item for in trying to increase affordable housing.
Okay. Okay, good deal. I appreciate you providing that further perspective. We actually haven't taken public comment on this particular item. Is there any public comment on the policy of flexible lot configurations? Okay, seeing none, is there any further board discussion, or further, do we want to move with our recommendation, to make no recommendation on this particular incentive strategy at this time?
I'll move.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving forward to our next policy, modification of street requirements. Can we get a brief staff synopsis for this one?
So in this case, the modification of street requirements could be roadway width, sidewalks, you know, how it flows, how the turns are. And unfortunately, most of our streets are either owned by Florida Department of Transportation or the county, and then even the city-owned streets are governed by Miami-Dade County.
Mm-hmm.
So we really don't have an option to implement that just for the city.
Okay. And our board discussion on this one was that further to that point, this incentive is not applicable to our city, and certainly isn't one that we can make a recommendation to help out more affordable housing in our city. So that was our recommendation for this one. Is there any public comment on this policy? Seeing none, board discussion or any motions?
So move that as stated.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving forward to our next policy, oversight of policies, procedures, regulations, or plan provisions that impact housing costs. Can we get a brief staff synopsis for this one? I believe that this particular policy involves our LHAP.
Debbie asked me to take a ride on this one. Those are already in place as stated in the synopsis. It is required, it's like the first one, expedited permit. It's a mandate of the state. So we already have it in place, and I think we recommend that it's already rolling. We recommend that we keep it in place and move forward with the process. But those are the two mandates. The expediting permit and the oversight of policy. We have to have them. We have to keep going back and review those policies as we are moving, we are jungling in the affordable housing crisis, improvement, if I can state it like that. So those, we cannot get away from it.
Okay,
We can either move it or leave it as is.
understood. So I believe to that point, our recommendation and our discussion was to leave it as is because it's currently already done in our
Yes.
LHAP.
Yes.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, board discussion or entertainment of a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Didn't mean to speak over you, sorry. All right, wonderful. Let's move forward to our penultimate policy, I believe, which is land bank inventory. Can we get a brief staff synopsis on this policy?
Yes, sir. What this is this says you have to keep track of and publish your properties that are owned by the city. So periodically, that are suitable for affordable housing. Because not every city-owned property would be suitable for affordable housing. And the city has a list of properties that they own and that they publish it through, pardon me, the purchasing department is responsible for that publication annually.
Okay, thank you. If I can provide just a brief synopsis of our discussion as a board on this particular item, I think when we think of all 13 strategies that we have to speak about, policy strategies by the state, I think this was probably, other than expedited permitting for affordable housing developments, this was probably the second most important item that we discussed and had a pretty progressive policy recommendation on. If I can do my best to just summarize what we recommended as a committee for this one, was that we recommended that the city actually create a community land trust that would be a nonprofit land trust run by, affiliates of the city, where the city would actually maintain the possession of land and donated parcels for affordable housing under long-term ground leases. So the idea here would be that I believe that folks who own land outside of the city could actually donate that land to the city's community land trust. The city would then put a long-term ground lease on that land that would mandate for a very long time that any development on top of this land has to be specifically for affordable or workforce housing in either rental basis or single-family homes for purchase to affordable and workforce housing tenants. And by that, this committee talked about the idea of keeping it pretty flexible and allowing a 0 to 80% area median income for what we mean by affordable, which would mean very low income, and middle income working folks in our community. I think this is probably one of the best policy provisions we could put forward to our city. And further, if I'm not mistaken, there's not many city-managed community land trusts currently in the county. Is that correct?
Right, normally it is not managed by the city on a community land trust. It's a nonprofit agency that we sponsor
Mhm.
and that we have some measure of oversight.
Mhm.
But that it allows them to take the land that the city owns and we donate it to that nonprofit. And so they'll operate it, they'll maintain it, and they'll assure that the only qualified folks are able to live there.
That's wonderful. To that point, are there many other city-sponsored, thank you for the correction, city-sponsored community land trusts in our county?
I can't, I can't think of, I think there are, but I can't think of who they are right at the
Yeah,
moment.
no,
so.
Catalyst Miami has one. There's a couple other entities they have something similar set up where their land is donated and, rehabbed for affordable housing. Miami Overtown CRA as well. There's a couple that has great examples of, and Mr. Schreiber, who is now our CRA director, can probably speak to the board about some of the additional affordable housing project that they were able to do at Miami Overtown CRA.
Yeah, he has a real wealth of knowledge on that.
Agreed. I think this would be fantastic for our city specifically to move forward. Is there any public comment on this particular item? Okay, seeing none, board discussion or entertainment of a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think this one is I don't know how well it's going to sit with the council because I did sponsor a procedure for city-owned land that did not get council support. I also brought up the idea of creating a land trust, and I know we talked about it, Debbie, and we're still coming up with, all the particulars because it's very complex. But I definitely think it's a recommendation that is needed. I just think maybe do we put a cap on how much of city-owned land? There's some developers, because of how their funding is, they need to own the land. So tying them to a lease may not be as, suitable. So that's a change that I would proffer, saying ground lease or purchase, because depending if you have an equity fund or if you have a opportunity zone, you're required to own that land. And then the last note, it's actually the finance department that has that list. The purchasing.
Was purchasing in the LDRs.
Okay, yeah, well,
Finance rate.
the finance, if you ever look for that list, it's
good
held
to
within
know.
the finance department because they know all of our assets. Like you said, suitable for affordable housing is going to be the key determining factor, and who will be the decision maker to say that, hey, this city-owned land is suitable for affordable housing? Because at our last council meeting, we passed the resolution that did just that with the Cloud Pepper Park selection, where we took city-owned land and we're getting ready to build on it. So that's the only,
If I may, Mr.
tidbit.
Chair.
Absolutely.
Typically, a community land trust is where Ms. McDonald would apply to the community land trust to purchase a home that we built on a lot. It typically is not at the developer level but it can be. But in the case of the city, the majority of the parcels that are single-family homes would be better set up for it directly from Miss McDonald to, do you need a house? Directly from Miss McDonald to work directly with the Community Land Trust. It's either rent-to-own or ownership, and the Community Land Trust, on the norm, are promoting home ownership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why most land trusts are not built for like big multifamily projects. It's really designed to get home ownership and give a leg up to the community. So I think if you may consider changing that verbiage from with potential developers of affordable housing to qualified applicants for home ownership or a rent-to-own program.
I think to your point, though, we already do have a sentence after that one that states the land would be sold, rented to individuals. I think probably the amendment should maybe go in that sentence where we would say the improvements on the land would be sold or rented to individuals, with 0 to 80% AMI. And I think to your point, most of the policies that we've suggested today involve big multifamily affordable housing rental developments. This and accessory dwelling units is probably one of the few sets of policies that actually involves home ownership. So just to be clear, we suggested a recommendation, amendment, I should say, of that the last sentence where we say the land would be sold, rented to individuals, where we would say the improvements on the land would be sold to individuals. Sold/rented.
That's right, because you retain, the land trust retains it, and there's typically a 99-year ground lease.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way the land stays in the possession of the land trust, so then they can assure that the people who buy or rent to own qualify. And it stays, and then they can only resell it at a certain level so that it no longer becomes like a commodity. It's more, this is your home. So you're not gonna make a whole bunch of money on the sale of the house.
Correct.
Okay.
Would our NSPs qualify for a program like this? Maybe when, I know right now we still own our NSP properties, but let's say we, wanted to donate our NSP, our what do we call it? The National Stabilization Program? Neighborhood Stabilization Program.
The ones that you own currently? Yes. Yes. That would certainly be an option to turn that over to the land trust, and they would manage it from, if there wasn't a structure on it, they would build the structure. If there's a structure on it, they would make sure that it gets the rehab it needs and then be managed by the Community Land Trust.
Everything we have right now is currently built.
So, and that would be fine. They would just take over the management of it, making sure that the people come in and they still qualify.
Now, here I will not go deeper in it because we have to go back. What was the agreement for the neighborhood stabilization program after the affordability period, how we dispose of those properties. So
I was just asking a
No.
question, not making a recommendation, because I know that's
we
something
good.
that's very.
This is something maybe
Certainly
that can be part of the discussion,
Yeah.
but we have to always go back to what was the agreement, because I think we are getting toward the end of our affordability period, Ms. Mary, 15 years. Yeah, so at this point, I can tell you from the top of my head, if the houses that was purchased to be rehabbed and sold, the money has to go to be injected back into our CDBG program. But for the one that we are currently renting, I don't have that in the top
No,
of my head.
I understand.
So that's certainly a consideration to explore.
Yeah, for next year, because I know those are something that, those NSP properties, people come to the city all the time. I want an apartment to rent, or I want a house, because the city used to give houses. And we have to remind them that that was a program that was from 2008, the people are in there. And so, and I know it's also time consuming for staff to run around as property manager, trying to collect rent. So, in further discussion of this, but
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just to piggyback off of what Councilwoman stated, I think that although she presented that policy, which I thought was a great policy on how we dispose of city assets, although it was not passed, as an advisory board, our job is not necessarily to give them what they want to or what they're going to pass. Our job is to advise them on what we think is best for the city. So I think we should continue in that path and allow them to make the decision that they choose to do. But as an advisory board, we advise.
I'm in 100% agreement on that. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for an amendment of the recommendation. Just as a quick reminder, that amendment was to change where it says the land would be sold, rented, the improvements on the land would be sold, rented to individuals.
So move.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Let's move forward to our last policy, encourage development around transit-oriented hubs. Can we get a brief staff synopsis on this policy?
Yes, sir. We have been way ahead of the curve on this. This is actually encouraging high-density development in certain areas of the city that are appropriate to make it more walkable, reduce the, hopefully it would reduce the cost of housing, but it is putting housing near transit hubs, whether that is a train station or it is a location of near bus stops and, you know, things like that. Now, we have that in our, we actually have 2 transit-oriented districts in our city, and so we are long ahead of this.
Fantastic. I love to hear that our city is ahead of the 8 ball here. Our recommendation as a committee on this particular item was, given that we are ahead in the development around transit-oriented hubs as far as our city's policy, that we also include this strategy in our current LHAP, which I believe it is not a part of.
No.
That's what I thought. Is there any public comment on this particular policy? Okay, seeing none, board discussion, entertainment of a motion.
So move.
Do I have a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I heard 2 ayes.
Oh,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? All right, wonderful. Well, congratulations to this committee. We've moved forward with recommendations for the next calendar year for each of our state-mandated policies. Next ahead in our agenda is new business. I believe staff wanted to review some tentative calendar meetings for next year.
In the past, way before me, when the committee was alive back in 2008, I think there was a tentative in 2011. They tried to revive it in 2018. Unfortunately, we didn't get the funding. We only received 50,000 at the time. So now, since we are back on track, I suppose we are gonna continue to see those money coming above the threshold. So what we have here, tentative, is for the committee to meet every 2 months, the second Wednesday of the month. But prior to that, you guys used to have 1 meeting quarterly. So it's up to you guys if you want to reconduct the old one once quarterly or once every two months. And it's gonna be the second Wednesday of every 2 months.
Is there any state mandated policy on how often this committee meets?
You guys make the decision.
we make the decision.
The only thing that is required, you have to meet to discuss those recommendation every year.
Okay.
Provided that we meet the threshold.
Yes, yes.
Well, it took us a long time before we could put the board together, so we don't need to wait for a threshold anymore. We need to move forward.
I know, right?
Agreed.
I would say quarterly, but we know affordable housing right now is a hot topic. So if the board wants to meet every 2 months, or every quarterly, which you're proposing now is every 2 months?
Every 2 months.
And do you feel like every 2 months is necessary right now?
Yes.
Okay.
For once is really to keep the board alive.
Mhm.
Because sometimes, after a quarter, we all forget about
What's going on?
everything, so
True.
it's difficult.
True.
That's number one. And then number two, with the actual situation that we are living right now with the affordable crisis, and I need to thank Debbie for that. It was very gracious of her to, most of our discussion was being inserted in the comprehensive plan. So that's mean, even though we don't have the approval or council yet, but they are drafted to be considered by council for the upcoming complaint. So for me, my recommendation will be that we have it once every 2 months, the second Wednesday of the month. The only thing for you, Councilwoman, it's gonna be a back-to-back.
Yeah, it's okay. At least I'm here.
Yeah, on a back-to-back.
But yeah.
I think I would love to meet every 2 months. This is one of the most, if not the most important issue that our city is facing right now, affordable housing. I think there's probably two concerns here. One, as you mentioned, the comprehensive plan. Half of the policies we tabled to next year because we do not yet have that plan and its associated studies in hand just yet. And I think the understanding was hopefully by March of 2023, we'd have that in place. And then after we have a chance to review that, then we can make recommendations on, I think there was like 4 or 5 different policies associated with that plan. So that's issue one. Issue two is there's an election next year, and most of our appointments on this board are associated with the terms of folks in office. And so if there's an election in May next year, that might mean that
They will be
at least a
impacted.
third, if not maybe half of our appointments, including myself, would no longer be on
And be
this
impacted.
committee.
Yeah.
And we'd have to reconstitute the committee all over again in May or June. So those are my just kind of two concerns. But other than that, I personally would love to meet every 2 months.
Yeah, I think we need to keep the ball rolling and wait until we get to the election, so we will make the decision at that point, because it's not really my fear. It's really to have it stop, and then we're gonna have the burden to bring everybody. I prefer to ask the new elected official to appoint instead of having to go back and start from scratch again.
So I have a
Absolutely.
quick question, Chair. If we would go every 2 months, so today's meeting, when would be the next meeting?
January 11.
They're in the agenda, Ms. Bloomer.
Right on the first
Item number
page.
On the
5.
first page. Just for the record, for those watching, the tentative calendar meeting dates are January 11th for next year, March 8th, May 10th, July 12th, September 13th, and November 8th. If this committee meets every 2 weeks.
Every 2
Or
months.
2
Every
months,
2
excuse me.
months.
2 weeks, I'm not there.
Mr.
So it
Chair.
doesn't take into consideration today's meeting?
Yes.
So 2 months would be January.
2 months would be January.
Now, the beauty of what you did today, it's like you don't have to come back for the 2022 report. We approve it today.
So, wait, so my question is, if, as the chairman stated, if there are some clear things that we cannot vote on due to the fact that you have the comprehensive report that's not going to be completed until March, when we come in January, what would we be discussing?
I will send a nice notice to cancel the first meeting.
And then, so then we
We
would,
will convene in April, so at that time.
because
March.
January and March
March.
would be no meeting.
No meeting. And then we will reconvene in May. At that point, you have time to go through the comprehensive plan, whatever draft that we will have approved by council. Do you have a commenting period, Debbie, for the comprehensive plan?
That has passed, but what you can do is the drafts are currently up on the project website. And I'd be happy to send the link over. I encourage everybody in the community as well as this committee to go there, take a look at it, make comment on it, take the survey, do a mapping exercise, and I ask each member of this board as well to promote that to your networks. Again, Planning Commission is going to hear them on December 6th, and then City Council for first reading on December 13th.
So really, you're just establishing how you want this advisory board to function and meet. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't. So
I'm suggesting.
you're suggesting.
Yeah, I believe staff is making
a
suggestion.
suggestion. However, if there's no business, you would cancel meetings.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's fair.
I think every 2 months is great.
I think it is too, and further, when we were meeting informally, some of those meetings were just on us getting an update on what the city's up to on certain policies,
Yes.
right? Like I believe our first 2 meetings were in that regard. And one could say that either the January or March meeting could be us getting an update on the comprehensive plan and
Yes.
what the city's moving forward with, so that we can then, let's say, in a March or May meeting, have specific recommendations that we would put forward.
Furthermore, we can even discuss what was the decision made by the planning commission for the December 6th.
Well, you'd also have the decision for City Council
Yeah.
in their
Mhm.
December meeting. You'll
Yeah.
know what they've
So we can know
approved
where they stand.
for at first reading.
Indeed, we could know where our council stands on that.
And also invite the CRA director. Do we have to vote on the meeting dates, or is it just a discussion?
Discussion, but I need a resolution so I can set those dates in the calendar, work out the dates with IT and
Okay,
so.
no problem. So-
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval tentatively of said calendar dates.
So
for next
moved.
year. Okay, do I have a second?
Yeah, so move here. Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're moving forward tentatively with those dates for next year.
Mr. Chairman, how are we meeting?
In
In
person.
person?
Moving forward to our last piece of the agenda, is there any other new business to be presented to this committee?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on July 12th, the City Council voted the resolution that I sponsored to continue with the housing study by FIU. It'll be updating our old housing study from 2015 to discuss how, this emergency housing crisis that we're having in the city of North Miami. So just wanted to let you all know, I'll be meeting with the consultants to discuss strategies, and I'll be meeting with housing, and of course, invite you all to that meeting as well. So that's all I have.
So
Fantastic. Quick question for you. Do you know when that tentative new study by FIU on affordable housing will be complete?
So we put the money allocation. It was about 58,000, I believe, for the housing study. So that passed in July. So right now we're onboarding the consultants, which takes about a couple of time. Good thing it's the same consultants that did the first study, so it'll be updating the newer study.
Okay.
Yeah, the FIU. So don't know how long it would be, but once we have that meeting, they can kind of give us a time frame.
that's your next meeting.
Fantastic. Items to discuss in January, perhaps.
Yes.
Wonderful.
We have plenty.
Yes, plenty. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, especially with Art Basel and World Cup, and for your patience with me. Some little sleep with newborns at home. Thank you.